live. Yes.
We're live, we're live, we're live. Welcome everyone. It's TraceyTV. I'm so glad you're here today and I'm so excited to do this. So Robin Foroutan, an amazing human, functional health registered dietitian. She actually speaks for the Dietetics Association on this very topic of functional health. Robin and I met way back when we were both working. Way back. Well, Robin was just saying that she remembers when I was pregnant with Charlotte, who just left for college. Yeah. So that's how far back we go. We were youngins, and I was really thinking about this today, Robin, we were really at the forefront of functional nutrition.
Functional foods, yeah.
Right, functional foods. That's when functional foods came out. People were really trying to understand the role of food in health. And it sounds crazy now. Well, I mean, still a lot of people aren't thinking about it now, but it was really probably the beginning of people really thinking about, not beyond knowing that food is good for you, what does the food do, right, in the body?
Right, like antioxidants. That was really like the beginning of really talking about antioxidants and like the function of food beyond just like eating.
Right. It's really, so it's fun. So Robin and I have remained friends that whole time, and we've, it's so funny because this is something we both worked on that we really loved, and we took our paths kind of around and in different ways. And we always talk about this stuff. We have lots of funny conversations online, and she was having a debate with one of her fellow health professionals on how you pronounce SIBO, S-I-B-O, SIBO or SIBO. And it's one of those things kind of like crick or creek. Like you've got a
tomato.
You've got a very specific opinion. It's SIBO. It's SIBO. For anybody that's asking, right? It's SIBO. That's the general.
I mean, she's not the only person who says SIBO. I hear it from time to time from very smart people, but so literally tomato.
Yes. Yeah. Tomato. Okay. Well, for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to call it SIBO because that's what I call it. And I've asked Robin to come on. She does private practice with people. She also works at a functional health center called the Morrison Health Center in New York City. And they do amazing work there. We've been there. My family's been there. It's an amazing place. So I'm so glad Robin is one of the people to talk about this topic. So I'm going to hand it over to her. I'm going to ask the questions. She's going to answer the questions. And we will start with what it is. What is SIBO, Robin?
What is it? So SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And all that means is that bacteria that should be in one part of the digestive tract moves up into a higher part of the digestive tract. And when they do their metabolic thing, because the bacteria in our digestive tracts, they're alive. So they eat, they essentially poop, and all of these toxins and metabolic processes are going on in our digestive tract all of the time. So SIBO is when those bacteria and whatever microbes move up into a higher part of the gastrointestinal tract. And when they do their metabolic stuff, they create a lot of gas. And so people get really bad bloating. There's usually a rhythm to the bloating, not 100% of the time, but there's usually like a rhythm to it. It can cause constipation or diarrhea. There's two main parts or two main types. There's the methane dominant and the hydrogen dominant and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think, this goes back to bacteria, people understanding bacteria in the body, right? So many of you, if you're listening to this, you may already know this, but there's more. Bacteria are a necessary and often super helpful part of our body. I think we got into a place where we think that like we don't want this is a whole microbiome, right? We live in concert with our bacteria. And then every once in a while, different parts of our body get out of whack where the bacteria is either not there the way it's supposed to be, or in this case, it's overgrown. And what she's saying, that's different kind of bacteria, like which type of bacteria is overgrown. So it isn't like you say you have SIBO, it's how many different types of bacteria in our body, right? It's
Oh,
like
there's trillions. And it's not just bacteria. You know,
trillions.
there's a phenomenon of SIBO. I don't know if you've come across that term,
No.
which is small intestinal fungal overgrowth.
Okay.
So what a lot of docs have done, you know, the really experienced one, I mean, look, SIBO, we used to regard it as like a root cause thing. I don't think of it like that anymore. It's a symptom. It's just another symptom. And so for most people who really struggle with SIBO, may not know it because not everybody recognizes the signs. And two, some people don't respond to treatment. So then you have to ask the question of like, well, is it the right, typically you use antibiotics, but you don't have to. Is it the right antibiotic? Is it fungal? Because of course, if it's fungal, the antibiotic is not going to do anything.
Right.
And then once you wipe that, so the purpose of the antibiotic is to clear out that part of the digestive tract that's not really supposed to have bacteria. But then the question is, can your body hold it there? Or does it keep creeping back? Because a lot of people will have this recurrent SIBO symptom or constellation of symptoms.
Right. So I want to talk about these symptoms and then let's dig into like how you get it. But I think one of the things that, you know, so many people deal with digestive issues. It's amazing to me.
So many.
Right. And it's not normal. It's not normal. Now, occasionally you might eat something that doesn't agree with you. Like if I decide that I'm going to have dairy, even though if I decide I'm going to have ice cream, I know that later my nose is going to be stuffed up and I might feel a little stuff. But in general, if you always have a stomach ache, if you are constantly constipated, if you have, you know, diarrhea, like that is not normal. And you shouldn't, I don't use the word
don't live like that.
Right. You don't need to, you don't need to live like that. It's not normal. And to Robin's point, like putting, you know, trying to put like, your Band-Aid on top of the problems. It's a symptom of something else that's going on. And I think this is why somebody like Robin is really useful, because you want someone with knowledge that can just ask the questions like, what's going on in there? Because that's what you need to figure out.
What's happening?
Right. What's going on? It's all from something. So I know that certain people are at higher risk of getting SIBO. So people who have diabetes, lupus, which is also just a blanket term for a lot of different things, right? And scleroderma, I've heard, is one of the ones that can also. But what are some of those, like, who's at risk of getting SIBO? Is there any group that's more at risk?
You know, it's funny because it's one of the really common conditions that that sometimes comes along with other conditions, but really like very healthy otherwise healthy people get SIBO. And I don't know which questions you got a lot when you asked it on Instagram and Facebook, but the question that I got the most was, how do you test? Like, how do you know?
Yeah, how do you test for it? How do you know? So we talked about the symptoms. If you've got any of those symptoms, right? The gassing, the blood, if anything is like weird with your digestion, fatigue.
Yeah. So there's a couple of hallmark patterns that really speak to SIBO. One is that you get really distended bloating about 2 hours after every meal, and it doesn't matter what you eat. The other one is that you get progressively bloated throughout the day, so that by the end of the day, you just like, I mean, you can look pregnant. It's really uncomfortable.
Right.
It's associated with constipation or diarrhea or both. And then there's some people who have this like bizarre form of very silent SIBO where they run the test and it comes back positive and they don't really have any of the symptoms for it, maybe other than like constipation and some pain.
Right.
But typically you see a lot of bloating when SIBO is present.
Okay. So how do you test for it?
It's a breath test.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you'll get these little pouches with a screw top, and you'll take the starter pack and you blow into it, and then you put the cap on it, and then you drink a solution, either it's usually some kind of like a sugar thing, to give basically the gut bacteria some substrate, some fuel to do their metabolism.
They're going to ferment, right?
They're going to ferment.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so then at different intervals, and different tests do it different ways, but there'll be different intervals. So like maybe you'll do another breath capture, 20 minutes later, then 30 minutes later, then an hour, then an hour and a half, 2 hours. And, sometimes the tests are like 6-hour tests, and you take it home and you just do that. And then the lab will plot how much gas is in your breath. It's called a hydrogen breath test, but they're also testing for methane too. And then you look to see, is the fermentation level normal, or is it just kind of like really high?
Mm-hmm. Cool. So that's fairly easy to do. That's a fairly
really easy.
Yeah.
No blood, no poop.
Excellent. All right. So I want to give you Robin's contact information if you want more information on how to do that at the end of this, because I think, listen, if your doctor doesn't know, if a lot of weren't trained on this stuff. Like, again, when Robin and I talk about this stuff, SIBO, I think 5 years old as a term. I mean, it's a baby new term, right? I mean, maybe 10 years. I mean, but that people are really studying and acknowledging that SIBO is a real thing is new. And so if you had a doctor that went to medical school, this wasn't discussed in any of the classes that they took at all.
Yeah.
Right?
And I will say the testing is not super reliable. It's, depending on which lab you use, it's notorious for false negatives, meaning that you really do have it, but the test shows that you don't. So the test is not 100% reliable. And the one thing that I will caution people on, just because it's happened in practice so often, is that, they either are or aren't diagnosed with SIBO, whatever, and they are either treated or not, depending on who the practitioner is. But the FODMAPs diet is really popular right now, and there's good research on it. I find in practice it works about 50% of the time for bloating. It's not a super reliable meal plan. But for the people who do get a lot of relief from their SIBO bloating symptoms from a low FODMAP diet, nobody tells them that you're only supposed to be on that diet for a couple of weeks so that the bloating chills out. That is not the treatment. So I'll have people that come to see me and they've been on the low FODMAPs diet for like 3 years, and they're noticing more and more sensitivities because their gut is leaky. So this is the FODMAPs diet can be very helpful just to dampen down some of the symptoms so that you feel more comfortable and less bloated in the short term. Not the long-term solution. You do not have to live your life on a low FODMAPs diet. That's the wrong way.
So I'll tell you that is not something that I've ever heard before. So I love that. That's a really great, because I mean, for those of you who don't know, we'll put some of the stuff in the notes. FODMAPs is a type of diet that has you avoid specific kind of foods that can cause, a disruption if you've got an unhealthy gut. So Robin's talking about leaky gut. This is leaky gut is something that all of us need to take seriously. So that's great to know. Okay. So what I heard you say in the beginning, what do you do to get rid of your SIBO?
Well, it really depends on what are the other factors that played into why you developed SIBO. So it's very individualized. The most cut and dry process would look like this. You're symptomatic for SIBO. You go to the doctor or a dietitian or whomever, and they do a breath test, and it comes back positive. And then you have a choice. The typical treatment is an antibiotic called Xifaxan. It's not absorbed systemically. It works only in the gut. And the typical dosing is for 10 or 14 days. I personally think that 21 days is more effective if you're gonna do an antibiotic. And then depending on the practitioner, they might follow up with an antifungal, because there's this SIBO, SIFO kind of thing where they often come together, where there's also a fungal overgrowth, which, the antibiotics won't touch that. The other way to do it, and this is particularly helpful for people who have recurrent SIBO, where they'll get relief for a certain amount of time and then it just comes back. And each time it comes back, it's like more aggressive and more aggressive. It's like, how many times do you want to take this antibiotic, really. And then you're not getting to the root cause. There's still stuff going on. And so part of what the constellation of things that happen is that you may have picked up a weird pathogen or a parasite or something like that, an amoeba, who knows? There's a lot of microbes that we're exposed to all the time. Low stomach acid is a really big one. I know that everybody is concerned about like reflux and high stomach acid.
I know.
But really,
most
like,
people have low, right?
It's most people have low, and that causes too much fermentation in the stomach, and then you reflux because the pressure is off.
Yeah.
But if your stomach acid isn't acidic enough, you don't get the chemical message later on in the digestive tract to send in digestive enzymes and all of these other things. So the pH of your entire digestive tract is now totally compromised. You're not going to absorb stuff. And that allows for SIBO and SIFO, for these microbes to move up. And at the same time, if you have low stomach acid, your gallbladder does not contract, and we need bile for a number of different things, obviously for, fat absorption and digestion, but, it also serves a pH purpose where, the gallbladder secretes bile into the digestive tract and helps you break things down and absorb your, fat soluble vitamins and all of that. But it also clears out that area where SIBO is a problem. So all of these organ systems work together in the most incredible, like, symphonic way where if one is off, the rest will compensate. And sometimes the right compensation is to shut down. So it's like, if gallbladder is not secreting, right, it's going to shut down stomach acid production, because if you have acid coming in and not enough enzymes or whatever to kind of neutralize the stomach acid, you're going to get an ulcer. So there really is a lot of wisdom in the body that we're just beginning to understand in what message, what organs communicate with what other organs. They're all working together in one body. So it's impossible to say, stomach is disconnected from gallbladder, is disconnected from colon and everything like that. I mean, there's just a network of communication going on in our bodies all of the time. All the time.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm always amazed that, it doesn't seem to happen. Gallbladder removals don't seem to happen as much as they used to, but I think growing up, people used to just take out their gallbladders thinking that it has a function. If it's in your body, it has a function.
Hello, the adenoids and tonsils, they'll take out your appendix, which some people think is like a holding place for some of the good bacteria. Like, we can't just take things out. I mean, you'll live, your body will compensate, but like, there are some other, there's some, like, kidney stones. Kidney stones is a big, consequence of not having a gallbladder. And it's this like whole chemistry of like, we learned about soaps in chemistry, which is like, it's like a chemical process with like base stuff, I don't know, minerals and like basic, pH up, and they do soaps. And so if you're forming soaps and then you're reabsorbing soaps, it ends up as kidney stones. It's confusing, but it's definitely a thing that happens. Like, if you take out a gallbladder and you're not digesting your fats, they malabsorb and you make soaps, and you could get a kidney stone, which is very common.
Yeah. Malabsorption. I mean, people say you are what you eat, you're what you digest and you're what you absorb, right? It's not what you eat. You eat all the good stuff, and then all of the units aren't working properly.
Yeah.
Show up in a weird place.
Exactly. And that is why supplementation is really important for people who have a compromised gut. Because if you're not absorbing all of the goodies that you're eating, it's like, all right, you've got a perfect diet, but you're still deficient.
Right. So good. Well, this was super helpful. So I'm sure many people, I see a bunch of people watching, if they want to get a hold of you, Robin, if they think they have it, if they want to work with you directly, what's the best way to find you?
Go on my Instagram and send me a direct message.
Okay. And your Instagram is?
Foroutania. .nutrition. So it's FOROUTANIA, and then it should pop up because I'm the only one.
Yeah. So I'll put it in the notes. I'll put it in the comments. And Robin's got great stuff on her Instagram all the time. Super great stuff. You're amazing. And I think this is what you'll see I think one of the great things, because Robin worked in a communications background for a while, she has a unique ability to take these complex ideas and explain them to them in ways that we can all understand, which is super, super helpful and a very unique trait. So I adore you, my friend. This was amazing. You're the best. We'll have her back, other topics.
Oh yeah, this is so fun.
Have a great day, everybody. Love you guys tons. We'll talk soon.